Good morning to you all. If everybody can start to become silent, and that's already happening, then I would like to welcome you all here in The Hague for a hybrid webinar. That also means that we have people that are viewing this session online. So welcome to you as well. We are here with more than 100 people. And the rest is all online, so we have a very large crowd for this update on Hynetwork Services. My name is René Schutte, and I'm your host of today. And on behalf of Gasunie, I would like to welcome you in this webinar. Before we start with the agenda, I first would like to point out the safety issues here. There is no drill planned, so if we hear an alarm, we need to leave the building, and there are 3 doors to leave this room. Online, you need to take care yourself, but here in the room, there are 2 exits at the back of the room, and there's 1 exit over here, and you need to follow then the personnel leaving this building. But hopefully it will not be necessary, of course. This session will be recorded. It's online, but it will also be recorded. The cameras are only on stage, so you will not be visible in the stream, just for you to know and be relaxed about maybe, or not, whatever you like. But nevertheless, it's only directed to stage, but it will be recorded, and you can, after this session, it will be put on the website of Hynetwork Services, and you can look back if you want to. And for the people here in the room, please mute your phones. To make sure that we don't have additional sounds that are not planned in this meeting. Webinar, Hynetwork Services development of the infrastructure. In 2020, that was on the 30th March of 2020, the Dutch government published their view, their strategy on hydrogen. That's about 3 years ago. In that strategy, they said, well, we need to have a look at the existing infrastructure and look if there is an option to repurpose the infrastructure and under what conditions that can be done. As a result of that, Hybrid 27 has been started. And it has been started in the mid of 2020. And by 2021, the results were published. And the government took a principal decision to start with the development of the infrastructure. And at that moment in time, Hynetwork Services started as the development of the infrastructure. And last year, a year later, we updated you on the developments, where we are and what the challenges are, what the planning is. And today, a year later, we again are going to inform you and update you on all the developments. But what you probably have seen last Tuesday, Gasunie made an announcement that the first part of the infrastructure will be built in Rotterdam and is scheduled to become ready in about 2 years from now. So we have already, since, let's say, the first paper, we already now in the development of really constructing and building the infrastructure. Well on the way. For today, the aim is to update you on the policy and regulatory framework, to update you on the market developments and the uitrolplan. It's the Dutch term, of course, but rollout plan is the nice translation of that, the rollout plan of the infrastructure. And also on the connection study agreements, how that is going to develop in time. You will be updated on that. There is also a trialogue process that has been started. Some of you may be aware of that, but you will be informed what that's all about and what the latest status is of that. And I'm not going to tell you this all. We have very good specialists that are able to do so. So this is the agenda for today. We will start with Gijs Postma. He's the member of the management team of Directorate of Energy Markets in DG Climate and Energy. And he will start with the update on the policy framework from Economic Affairs and Climate Policy. Then we will have an update on the infrastructure development by Guido Custers. He's the project director of Hynetwork Services. On the business development process, the commercial update, Anouk van den Berg will give you an update on that. And finally, on the contracts and the trialogue table, Sandrie Egberts will inform you where we are and what the next planning is. This will take about, let's say, 1.5 hours. After that, we will start the dialogue, and the dialogue will be with you to follow up questions and to take questions and answers, and also grasp your opinions that may be shared with us. After that, and that's not unfortunately for the people that are in the live stream, but is for the people that are here, we will have a network lunch. And what you probably have seen on your cards will be explained some later, is there are some different colors because we have representatives of the full value chain here in the room. There will also be online, of course, but that's a little bit difficult for the lunch. But here, the full value chain is here. So there's a very good opportunity to meet and connect and discuss opportunities between each other. But I will explain on that a little bit later. And then some practicalities. We appreciate very much to have your questions. And obviously, it's difficult if you have a hybrid session to do that via microphones. So we would like you to ask all the questions, and it can be done during the presentation via Mentimeter. I assume that most of you have experience with that. You see here the code of Mentimeter, and that same code will be on every slide. So if somewhere down the line something goes wrong, then you still can find the appropriate number. And of course, here's the QR code that may facilitate you to have easy access as well. So please ask the questions via Mentimeter. It will also make sure that we can grasp all the questions that you have, capture them. We will try to answer them during the session. But at least we know for sure that all the questions are captured also for later purposes. We will try to answer all the questions, but you may understand that not on any question all the answers are already available. But we will do our best with that. And then we go to the first presenter of the day. May I invite Gijs Postma of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy to address the first part on the update on the policy framework. Nice.
Thank you, René. Good morning, everybody. Nice to be here. As René told, first time we had this kind of session, it was totally digital, so it's nice to have some faces looking at you when you're telling a story. I would like to update you a little bit on the policy issues that come with this session. So, and it's brief, so hopefully it's brief and clear as well for you. I'll look at you shortly on, let's say, a brief overview of the hydrogen policy. And next I'll look a little bit with you into the subject of the regulation, which is a two-phase regulation, but I'll come to that later. Maybe my best advice for you is, if you want to have an update, a complete update on policy, just Google all the letters we sent to Parliament on the issue waterstof. You will see countless number of letters in which we explain a lot about everything that we have in mind, that we have decided and are about to decide. On upscaling infrastructure and also, for instance, energy diplomacy. And that gives the best overview you might possibly want to have. If not, you have to do it with my story this morning, which is very short. Interesting to see and to note that the government is spending 10 billion euros in, let's say, supporting the birth and the growth of hydrogen in the Netherlands. In a letter from last week, you will note that there will be, you will read 9 billion, but before this letter, we already had 1 billion decided on. So in total, it's 10 billion. A lot of this is focused on the upscaling of electrolysis and import, but also, as you probably know, part of this is prepared for investing in the infrastructure for which we are here today. So related to the infrastructure, you will read there that the permitting procedures for the backbone are already starting. They are under what we call the Rijkscoördinatieregeling, which I'm not going to translate. We have already several plans for import terminals. For offshore, there's also production pilots in preparation for 100 and 500 megawatt. So there we will also need infrastructure for which already 50 million has been prepared for the first studies, of course. You cannot build an infrastructure on sea for 50 million, regretfully. Also you will read there that for, let's say, not the 5 clusters, but all the others, we will do a study, because it's a little bit more complicated to find out how to reach them effectively. So the study will be starting this summer, and we will come up with results later and see what are the best ways to reach all the others outside the 5 clusters that we are having in the Netherlands. So that's a brief overview of the policy. Then for the regulation, as I said, 2 phases. One, and I start at the one further down the road, is the regulation which is already being drafted in the decarbonization package. And until that moment, we will do it with the service of general economic interest. The Dutch word is dienst voor algemeen economisch belang. I'll tell a little bit more about that later. First, the regulation. So that's bound to be starting in 2031. Maybe you know that at the moment there are trilogues and etc. going on within the European Union on the decarbonization package. So it is expected that we will reach a final agreement by the end of this year, and that is setting the scene for everything beyond 2031. That has to be implemented in the gas directive and the gas regulation, which on its turn is being implemented into national law once that has been decided. This is a typical Brussels process, so it's normal what you see here, but yeah, we're depending on different processes that we are having a vote in, but we are not the only ones. So once the directive has been set, the implementation into national law will be arranged within 24 months. There you will see that Hynetwork Services will be the network operator, and then the regulation will see on all kinds of parameters and then other important issues like tariffs, third-party access, etc., etc. So that's beyond 2031. Up until 2031, we will have the dienst of algemeen economisch belang. So that's sort of subsidy grant to cover the losses that we are, of course, we are facing losses because we are starting a new network which is not being filled like the current gas or electricity grid. That's why the 750 million has been appointed for this. The regulation will be about subsidy provisions, and of course we will anticipate on everything that's going to come to us with the gas directive and the gas regulation. So like in that period, also in the period until 2031, we will make arrangements and give clarity on the governance, on the tariffs, on third-party access, etc., etc. And as mentioned here, also an important issue, the quality. We are finalizing our study on this issue. So those are the things that you will see coming at you until 2031. And this all boils down into, because that, of course, is for you interesting, the standardized contracts that will be used by Hynetwork Services. And There have been already many discussions on the content of these contracts by FMW, Energie Nederland, Hynetwork Services, and the ministry. So this is, let's say, the policy environment in which all this is taking place. Brief, hopefully sufficiently clear for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gijs, for this introduction on the policy. Please keep in mind that you can ask at any moment in time questions in Mentimeter, and if there are some questions that I can pick up in between the presentations, I will do so, but not at this moment. So, but please feel free to drop any questions, and also questions that may be addressed later. So that's not an issue. I would like to invite Guido Custers to stage. He is the project director for Gasunie on the network development of the hydrogen network. And he will explain more in detail on the steps for that.
Thank you, René. Good. A warm welcome to everybody. It's good to see as many of you in this room, and I can't see how many that are online, but I guess there will be also quite a good crowd online. So today is all about informing you on the status of our developments. So I'll try to do that as briefly as possible. So, but please, if I skip things that you wanted to know, please ask questions. Maybe starting off with why Gasunie is anyway doing this in general. Obviously, as Netherlands, we have a target on CO2 reduction, and we want to be playing a part in that development. I very often use at presentations a slide where we show the role of Gasunie as a midstream player, and that's exactly why we are doing this on the hydrogen network. We do a lot more than that, but that's why I have this picture. So we're developing this hydrogen network for the whole of the Netherlands. Main task is, and it was already referred to by Gijs, to connect all the 5 industry clusters. But I always elaborate a little bit on that because there's a little bit more that we need to do. We need to connect that with the foreign countries in the south, with Belgium, and obviously on the east with Germany. And we need to connect it to storage and on land terminals and or offshore on landings onto our network. So it's a bit more than only the 5 clusters, but we focus on the main grid. And I'll talk a bit later on. I'll tell you a bit more on the smaller grids. We're trying to take a lead in that. Pipeline has always been our business, so that's why we are doing this. And by connecting it to the other countries, we try to create a gateway basically to Northwestern Europe. Then a general update on the project. Well, what you see is that we have a lot of collaboration with the market, and it's part of why you are all here in this big numbers, including the ones online, already demonstrates that we are in discussion and the talks with a lot of you. So we do this together. We're trying to A, develop a project, and B, create the market with you. So we need to do this together, and that's basically what we find is a very positive sign that this is really going on quite well. What you can see already from the activities that we are doing is that we are already requesting permits across the Netherlands. So the Rijkscoördinatieregelingen, as Gijs already referred to, we've applied for those already across the Netherlands. Not all of them are at the same pace, but we're trying to do them as quickly as possible. There's a lot going on in the Netherlands on permitting, so we need to do this cautiously and correctly in order to make sure that the process is as smoothly as possible. What also happened in the meantime, that and you saw in the announcement on one of these letters that already was referred to earlier, that the IJsselmeerroute that we had on our previous plan is going to be delayed because of all gas flow changes that are happening. That meant that for us the southern west to east route that was on our target became more important. which then again meant that we looked at which of the routes is the most likely for us to follow, and then we discovered that that was the same route as the Delta Consortium was trying to put a hydrogen line in. So we started a discussion with the partners, and ultimately we joined the partnership, which means that for hydrogen, the hydrogen line in that corridor is now part of the Dutch network and will be operated by Hynetwork Services / Gasunie. And the good news, already mentioned by René in his introduction, is that the first real drilling activities, so the first shovel is going into the ground in the Rotterdam area, which is obviously the starting point of the whole connection from the Netherlands to Belgium and Germany. So it's a good sign that we also physically, very shortly, we will be visible outside, not only by permitting, but also by physical activity by shovels. Then the rollout plan, or uitrolplan, as it is called in Dutch. Well, what can I tell about that? Well, first of all, when I joined the project in the end of last year, there was still a lot to be investigated. So a lot of things were unclear and needed in more detail to be evaluated. So that's what we did. That gave us a lot of insight. Meant that we were clearer on where can we start what, how long is it possibly going to take to repurpose a line and or build a new line to connect the two. So that's what we, in the first instance, have been doing so far. The good news is that looking at the original rollout plan, the starting was in 2025 and the end was in 2030. That's still the case. So that's the good news. But, and that's the thing, in between, some things are changing. So not only in the bad way, but also in the good way, but things are changing, or at least are now more visible, what is possible, what we can do. So what we are actively doing is making sure that we, at the highest speed as possible, because that's the plan that we have today, start building this national hydrogen grid, as was envisaged earlier. Obviously, we'll do this as so far in good collaboration with yourselves here in the room, as producers, customers, storage operators, terminal operators, and whatever more is needed in this market. So what have been these changes, and why were they basically occurring in that plan? First of all, I already indicated that the gas market changed. So when I came into this project, we already very quickly knew that we had to change the original Highway 27 plan, which was an earlier plan, because the gas market changed. Flows were no longer as we were used to. The other thing is we knew that we had to basically start with another west to east connection. That's why we stepped into the partnership on the Delta Rhine corridor. On permitting, as many of you know who are in construction, it's quite difficult nowadays with the nitrogen issue that we have to get permits. So you need to be very consciously in how you roll out those processes, which unfortunately takes some more time. And generally what we see in the market is not only at ourselves, which we are basically represented a little bit in this picture in the middle, but also in the market. So constructors, engineers, and all the people we need basically to get the market going. Everybody has issues on availability of sufficient amount of resources, because there's so much work to be done on this whole transition that well, everybody is asking for the same resources. And now to the important bit, I guess, for all of you. We still have 3 phases, so let's start with that one. The first phase that we call the coastal areas, oftewel the kustclusters, to say it in Dutch. So we'll make sure that the coastal areas in the industry clusters in Zeeland, Rotterdam, Amsterdam, and the North are constructed. And that's now going to be our first delivery phase in our plan. If you've done that, obviously, then you start looking at how do you then connect everybody. So how do you go to the next phase, which is the connecting phase. And in the connecting phase, we connect these 4 areas with each other, but we already are able to connect them also to the 5th industry cluster in the south in Limburg. And then obviously, there's still a 3rd phase to be done, which we call closing the circle, because as you all know, we have basically the idea that we need a circle basically to be able to operate effectively our grid. So we'll add the northern part to it, and in the meantime, from 2030 onwards, and that's why it's dotted here, there will already be there are already plans for a offshore connection. So we'll have more than one basically opportunity to connect west to east. In the 3 phases, you saw that in the first phase already we have connections to Belgium and to Germany. We'll elaborate that in the next phase where we start connecting. We connect also more with the other countries. And even in the 3rd phase, we'll add even more connections to abroad, so that the role that we have as an international player in the market for the Netherlands as a main supplier for hydrogen can be basically elaborated in that. How do we now go from here basically with this new rollout plan? The idea that we already was in the original request that we got, that as soon as we start changing, and this is a change obviously, we will first of all present it, and then secondly go and get your basic feedback on what does it mean for the market. So we'll do that on Monday. We'll publish this rollout plan on the website, including basically a form, an online form, where you can basically give your views on what you see there. That will be open for about 4 weeks, well, not for exactly 4 weeks, to be honest. And then we start collecting and answering all the remarks and questions that were in there. And what we'll do then is basically make the plan complete, put it in a package basically, and send it off to the ministry, so that the minister can basically acknowledge the new plan, including all the things that we've just elaborated on. That was my story so far. Are there any questions that I should answer immediately, or?
Yeah, let's try to answer one of the questions, and that's coming back a couple of times, and that has to do with the fact that you explain that you start with the coastal clusters and also with Limburg, but what about cluster 6, which is large but spread it around the country? So
it's a very good question, by the way, and sorry that I didn't already elaborate on it. Obviously, we've got them inside. So for us, every customer is an important customer, also those who are not directly in these industry clusters, and that's what we'll do. Everybody who basically gives us a sign, gives us a call, we'll go and have a discussion. That doesn't mean that we immediately start flying around and connecting everybody, but it does mean that we will look at how can we do this, when is it needed, and what does it take to get the connection. Good news that I can add to that, and was already in the presentation of Gijs, there was already a study going on by the ministry, but also by the other network operators, so the distribution grid, our colleagues basically in the Netherlands, where we are connected in Netbeheer Nederland. We are together collectively already looking at how can we expand the grid after the main grid is ready. So that we not basically sequentially do this, but how can we start this up quickly, so that we have the right connections already and the spreading of the grid from there on, so that everybody who wants to change his usage of fuels to hydrogen, he or she can do that. Hopefully that answers that question.
I think that will be answered, and if not, please feel free to ask a follow-up question on Mentimeter, so that already stays. And maybe a little bit more technical question that is coming up, but of course is bothering a lot of people, and it's about the nitrogen problem that we have. What is the effect of the nitrogen problem also on the announcement that you've made on the development of the infrastructure in Rotterdam? So will it hinder that development, but more in general, what is the impact of that on the development of the grid?
Well, generally, the nitrogen problem is obviously a problem for everybody, not only for us. On the announcement that we made in Rotterdam, we've got our permit, so we have been able to secure sufficient promises and way of working basically to make sure that the nitrogen that we do deposit is really kept to a minimum within all the boundaries that are there. Obviously, it's a good question that as soon as the law or the High Court for example, the Potters case comes with a ruling that means that everybody has to stop doing anything, that will have an effect on this plan. So that's why I had it on my presentation that the plan that we have and the timing that we have is so far done with all the best knowledge that we have, that we are able to get permitting on all those trajectories that we are building. Obviously, I can't predict the future, unfortunately. If I could, I would possibly not stand here. But
I will not ask you, but basically for the Rotterdam development, it's okay for now, and for the rest, it's part of the general problem that everybody faces. So thanks very much for this moment. There are more questions that have been asked already, but I want to try, of course, to get them together in the end as well with the other presenters here. And for now, I would like to invite Anouk van den Berg. She will give you an update on the business development process for the hydrogen network. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. It's very nice to have you here in the room and also online. Many familiar faces, but for those I haven't met, my name is Anouk van den Berg, Commercial Manager of the Hydrogen Network. I have been involved in the project as of the start, mainly with a focus on Rotterdam, but in my current role I have a national focus and I'm responsible for all matters of business development. Let's see. Yes, I would like to start to inform you on some general updates. We do see, first of all, we see a growth of interest in our services, transportation services, but also connection services. Not only within our own country, but really also abroad. We see interest growing from exporting parties that want to make use of our services to also access Northwest Europe. Off of that, it's very good that we have been in contact with many of you. And we have been present at conferences, at eWorld, but also at the Hydrogen Summit in Rotterdam. It was very valuable to talk to many interested parties and to exchange knowledge and ideas. It's very key for us to work towards mutual understanding of our drivers and also to the different business development processes as we are together in developing this hydrogen value chain. What we also see is in the development of the full chain is that the Netherlands has a hub function with important connections to Belgium and to Germany. And we have intensified and further intensify the cooperation with our cross-border TSOs. Well, to work towards those realization of connection and to seek for alignment explicitly on the timing of that. Lastly, besides a broader product or besides a broader system development, we have also worked on made progress in the product development to align our services better and better with, well, your demands. So what do you want and does it fit with our services? A good example of that is, I think, the workshop that has taken place with the representative organizations, so also called the trial process, of which Sandrie will tell you a little bit more later on. That we have had on the pipeline flexibility service to better align that with your demand. Well, I want to go back to the first point I make, increasing interest. I think a very nice development. We see increasing interest in the network and the transportation service, but also on the connection service. But besides that, we also experience that parties are more and more ready to take the next step and work towards more binding commitments. And as a result of that, we are excited and thankful that the first transportation contract is signed and we can start construction in Rotterdam after the summer. This also asks, so the increasing interest, we also experience that parties want to take the next step in the process, prior an investment decision, and that's also a reason that we see a need to further streamline the connection process. So let me elaborate a little bit more on that. So what you see on the slide here is that we see an increase in general market interest, but of course, if you want to make use of the network, we also see a request in interest or an increase in interest to connect to our network. And besides that, we also see that parties really put serious resources and budget in that connection process, and there we experience a mutual desire to make agreements prior an investment decision. And therefore, we introduce an additional step in the process, which we call connection study agreement. This is a step that is introduced after submitting an expression of interest. So before I tell you a little bit more on this exact agreement, I would like to clarify a little bit more on how we envisage to work towards creating mutual commitment. So what you see on this slide is that we split between network development and development of the connection. If you look at the development of the network, as Hynetwork Services, we receive a subsidy which enables us to start the preparation of the network. At the moment of realization of the network, we do require transport agreements, as we want to develop a network that will be used by our customers. The connection is a little bit slightly different, because if we want to start the preparation for the connection, we ask for a connection study agreement. The first initial step in this process we will start, but if we want to step into a more detailed study work, we require a connection study agreement. Similar to the network, to the development of the network, at the moment that we really take the step towards realization, construction, building the connection, there needs to be an investment agreement in place. So what it says underneath on the slide is that the service's general economic interest status should give you the confidence that we are really serious in developing the network, and that by signing a connection study agreement, you create more certainty that the right connections will be in place at the right time. Please, if this is not clear, just put your questions in via Mentimeter. The same message on a slightly different, in a slightly different visual, hopefully a little bit more recognizable, as we have used this in the last information session and have also used this over the last year. So the only thing that changed in this process is an introduction of the CSA. And that is really done to ensure that we can get the right connections in place at the right time. So what do we agree on in this agreement? So it's an agreement between Hynetwork Services and a customer that would like a connection on our network, in which we together agree to work towards an investment agreement and towards a realization of the connection. And in this agreement, we as Hynetwork Services commit us to doing the necessary study work, which is needed to be able to agree on an investment agreement. Before that begins, we ask you for a guarantee of 150,000 euros, which of course will only be claimed if the study work does not result in an investment agreement and connection. Well, this is a very brief introduction of the CSA process. More details on the contract and the process will be available online in the middle of July. And also, of course, via our entire team. So also, please feel free to contact us for more information. Yeah, we are, as a team, we are confident that with introduction of this process, we contribute to having the right connections in place at the right time. And we look really forward to keep on working good together to realizing the network, including the connections. And I think I can express this enthusiasm also on the team. And they are very, excited to take and to work on the next steps with you. So we hope to continue with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Anouk, for updating us on this part of the development process. As part of the development process, there are also a lot of technical issues that need to be arranged. Just to be clear, where is that going to happen? One of the questions is leading to purity of hydrogen, which is already said that it's still underway. How do you deal with those questions? Because it might be questions that are involved in setting up the study and the results of the study.
It's a very good question. I think what I said is that the initial study work will be done prior a CSA. So we will not directly step towards a connection study agreement, but it is very customer specific and site specific. So that's why it's a bilateral process in which those details have to be discussed in good conversation with each other. So it's very hard to answer more than that. It's kind of a process answer.
That's fine. It's just to be clear what the current state of that is. And just to be clear as well, anybody can ask for a connection. So it's not only parties that want to feed in, but it can also be import, it can be storage, it can be
everything. Everyone is very welcome to connect. In that we have to have a good conversation, as also Guido and Mr. Postma introduced, on what is the logical point to connect to the network. But we're very happy to talk with everyone and open. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's clear for now. So thank you, Anouk, for sharing this with us. And we will go to the next part of this presentation, which will be done by Sandrie Egberts, who's chairing the trialogue table with representative organizations, but he will explain all about that. So Sandrie, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, René. Good morning, everybody. Yes, there are a lot of people in the room that I've met before, but for those who haven't, my name is Sandrie Egberts. I'm not with HNS. I'm from Gasunie. I'm working for GTS in the sales department, actually. And why I'm here, I will explain in a few minutes. So, where's my clicker? Anouk, you got the clicker? Yep. So, what Guido already explained, that there are 3 phases in the uitrolplan, rollout plan. These are actually the 3 phases that you see here on the right. The 3 phases: start operation in the coastal areas, connecting, and further development of the network. Obviously, if you want to build contracts and start talking about contracts, you need a lot of preparations. And that's exactly what's stating the first phase that's on this slide. In May 2022, HNS consulted a first standard set of contracts for the hydrogen network. Market parties reacted on that, obviously, and it was decided that after this consultation, there wasn't going to be put a new set of contracts in place, but that we first start talking with market parties, and especially through a trialogue table where FEMWE and Energie Nederland are invited to sit at the table and talk about these standard contracts. In the coming years until 2030, we will witness a lot of activities on a regulatory level, and obviously this has its impact on the set of contracts that's going to be developed. European rules will be implemented in the Dutch law, as Gijs already explained, and the role of the regulator, ACM, will change from an observer into a formal regulator. As of 2031, as Gijs also had in his presentation, we anticipate a full regulated business, and also the terms and conditions will mature during that phase. For example, we anticipate that in that time we will introduce a different form of balancing. We will have different standard capacity products. There will be congestion management procedures, but that's not for now. For now, we are focusing on the first steps that fit better with a network in development. And we actually think, and that was also shared at the trilogue table, that gradually the set of conditions will grow into a set of conditions that we are used to with GTS in natural gas. So, for the trilogue table, as I explained, we decided to instantiate like a round table where HNS, FMW and Energie Nederland discussed the standard set of contracts. And the idea there was that we would jointly develop positions and agree upon critical terms and conditions that must be broadly supported by market players. And how did we achieve this goal? Or achieve, not finished yet, but going on. In September 22, there was the decision to enter into these discussions and start up the trilogue table process. And we decided that it was probably a good idea to have the EZK at the table, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, because, and as I will explain later also, that not everything is covered in the contract set. And part of it is guided by the ministry, so it's good to have them at the table so that we can have questions and that the ministry can see what's happening. And there comes my role. Why am I there? HNS thought it was a good idea to have like an independent chairman of this table, and they asked me to fulfill this role. And I'm happy that I stepped in because I think it's a nice job and it was a good process that we did. We had our first meeting on the 13th of October. And since then, we had every other Friday at the FMW premises, we met with like 14, 15 people and talked about all the things that needed to be said. And on the 31st of March, we released the first update of the contract set that was consulted back in 22. We call it version 1.0. And on the 12th of May, we discussed a lot of feedback from parties on the remaining critical points. At the moment, we are working on a new update. Actually, HNS released a new update last Monday and updated it yesterday a little bit for the annexes. So it's there. And on the 7th of July, we will meet again in Woerden at FMW premises and see where we are now. For the process, we developed terms of reference as a guideline for that process. The documents that were talked about in this setting were a transport agreement, a connection agreement for the entry, and a connection agreement for the exit. And obviously, for all these documents, there are annexes, technical annexes. They are not totally finished yet, and they will gradually be released in the coming periods. The final goal of this total process was to accommodate that both HNS and market parties are able to take a timely and a final investment decision and ensure that the development of the hydrogen projects throughout the value chain can be continued. And therefore, all parties handed in like critical main points to be discussed about, and these were the topics that we discussed at the table. And the aim there was to reach consensus. Some topics were a little bit more difficult than the others, and especially two of these topics were the pipeline flexibility service. That's like a premature balancing regime that's needed in the first phases of this network and development. And we instantiated separate workshops for this. And we also had a separate workshop for maintenance. It was more like an explanatory. There were some discussions on the specific contract details for maintenance, outage periods, that kind of stuff. And well, there was a separate workshop for that, and I think it was very helpful. Again, not everything is covered in this contract set. The hybrid third-party access conditions, the quality parameters, and the allocation of subsidies are out of scope for the trilogue table, but obviously very important for all the people at the table. And the statement on the table was that these topics should be discussed with the Ministry of Economic Affairs. For results, as I said already, 31st of March, we released version 1.0. And in this version, I can say that there were really big improvements on the contract set, on access and termination rights, on a capacity transfer mechanism, exceeding penalties. There's now more clarity on liabilities. There's a new amendment process in the contract set, and there actually is a role for this trilogue parties in this amendment process. Balancing and the pipeline flexibility services, very much improved, I must say, and maintenance periods are updated in the new set that we released then. So I can probably say that we have an improved set of general terms and conditions. There's more mutual understanding why what is written fits with the network in development. There are a lot of misunderstandings solved. We have a shared goal at the table. And I can say in general, probably there is more trust between parties that we all have this shared goal in mind. And as was already stated by the other speakers, it resulted in effect in one signed transport contract that actually references this new set of general terms and conditions. There will be a future role for the trilogue table, as I said. We are finalizing version 1.0, talking about it on the 7th of July. And there is a role for the trilogue table in the amendment process. For now, we have FEMWE and Energie Nederland at the table. It might just be that once we get the amendment process rolling out, that other representative organizations will also be at the table. So then we get multi-trilogue. I don't know how to translate that, but a lot of parties might be expected. Then this is actually one of the extra results that we saw at the table. Eimert Melwijk, present in the room, actually designed this picture. And it just showed to all parties at the table that the trilogue table is not all that we have to do. There's a lot more. Parties need to monitor all the developments in the European setting on the Dutch law side of the things. The subsidy scheme, so the role of the ministry needs to be taken care of. And the trilogue table is just part of this puzzle. So for a successful investment, it's crucial that parties monitor all these developments and understand the effect of the individual development on the others. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Sandrie. You were ready a little bit earlier than I expected, but thanks for having this presentation. You already hinted to that, but as you know, quite recently, the new branch organization for hygiene has been launched, NL Hygiene. So should that not be a logical party at the table? That was one of the questions asked by the audience.
Well, as I said, for me, they are welcome. Not now. I think it's better that with the parties at the table, the 3 or 3.5 that we have at the table now, they have run this process. So it's good to finish off this with a 1.0 version of the contract set. And after that, we will have discussions on how to, let's say, go on with the trialogue process after we release that one.
And do you have an expectation on the timing of that?
We hope that we can finish before summer with 1.0. 7th of July. Okay. It's a crucial date here. And after summer, we will obviously have discussions on next steps.
And can parties in the meantime contact you just to show them, to have them invited?
They might contact me, but I think it's better to contact HNS. Mike Broersma probably is the best person to contact here.
Perfect.
And she will get in contact with me and then see what we can do.
Thanks very much. That's for now, for this part of the presentation. And obviously, we will continue with some more questions that have been asked. But you will be together with more people at the stage. The chairs will already be taken. So may I invite also Guido and Anouk to be here. And we will continue with the next part, with the in dialogue. First of all, one of the questions also was, are the slides being shared? Yes, they are being shared. Obviously, this is recorded and the broadcast will also be on the website, but the slide itself will also be on the website. So you can find them back later. Don't need to take pictures now. All the information will remain available for everybody. Yes, we are a little bit early in the program because some of the questions I kept for later, which is more easy if there are more people on stage to have them answered in one go, and maybe several answers on one question from several disciplines. So we have a little bit more time for the questions that have been asked. And after that, at about 12, we will close the recorded session and invite you for lunch. So that's a little bit about the timing that we're facing at this moment in time. But we will go to the in dialogue. A question still, please ask them via Mentimeter. It goes quite okay at this moment in time. A lot of questions are coming, and I'm also having the opportunity now to try to bundle a little bit in similar topics. And just let's start with one of the topics. One of the topics is storage. Apparently, a lot of you are interested in having storage or storage connections or whatever. It was explained that the launch of the network in Rotterdam has taken place. Maybe let's start. When will the storage be connected to Rotterdam? Is that something you can elaborate on?
Well, Is my mic on?
Yes.
I'm not sure my mic is on, but it will get on, I guess. What you can see from the connection phase, basically in the next phase, that after the launch of the coastal areas, we'll connect everybody, and at that time, the connection from Rotterdam basically is available for getting to the storage. I think what we can say is Monday when we present when we put the rollout plan on the website, I think everybody can see for himself from where he or she can connect to the storage. And more detail, as already said, please contact your contact person at HNS, and we'll make sure that we'll explain exactly at what day, at what time that the intention is to connect you.
Okay, so the timing can be explained, but you will see in the phasing of the network that it will take some time before everything is connected. That was one of the questions regarding the storage. Another question, or some of the questions coming up about import. Do you have any expectations on how much of the hydrogen, in whatever form, will be imported into the grid? Is there a scenario, planning, prognosis, whatever?
What we do as a grid operator, obviously, is we'll look at what is available on market data. So we look at the projects that are presented in that direction, and we match that with our grid. For us, it's difficult to exactly say when that will be available, in what quantities, etc. The only thing we try to do is obviously make sure that in our network planning, we try to take all market information that's available. But we're not, as a grid operator, building them ourselves, so it's difficult to pinpoint exactly when what will be available.
Okay, so the basic is we follow what the market wants. If you put it like that.
General addition, I don't know.
Yeah, please.
By my work? Yeah. Okay. That we, in general, see the interest increasing, but mainly also on the import side. We really have seen more terminals being developed over the last year of having expressed their interest in our services. So that's a very remarkable observation of last year.
So that's picking up as well. That's
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think about 2 years ago nobody really discussed import, but you see the topic coming more and more to the table as well. If you look at import, you also look at other countries, and there is an explanation of how the network can develop and be connected to other countries. And I'm not sure if that's for Anouk or for Sandrie. And on the border points, there will also be contractual connections. So how will you take care of that? How is that involved into the process? Is that at the table? Is that at study development? So.
I'll start and you can.
Okay, please do so.
You can continue. Well, I think Harry Smit is also in the room. He's sitting over there. He is working really hard on all the connections and on realizing that. So we really intensify the contact with the cross-border TSOs on working towards that realization. And I think the challenge is in that to have the realization ready on both sides. So seeking for and finding alignment on the timing. So that's something that the business development team does.
And that's alignment on the timing, but there's also alignment on the contractual parts of cross-border.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, that's something that's not at this moment not part of the trilogue process, but is done on bilateral basis.
Okay.
If that is the answer on the question.
Yeah. Is there anything? Is it a topic at the table, at the trilogue table?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, so that might come in future as well.
Amendments.
Amendments. So for after summer, after 7th of July, that may be the case. There are the people that are quite willing to develop their projects now. Can they sign a transport agreement today? Do you have your papers with you? Can we fill out the names and can everybody sign?
Yes, I think I can be very short on that. It's a yes. Yeah.
Okay, so you are all invited. I'm not sure who asked the question, but please report to Anouk and she will have the papers drawn up for you, so it can be done. There are also, and I already asked a little bit of question on purity, because purity is not only the contractual part, but it's also the cross-border issue that is at the table. How do you deal with that? What about the purity discussion? Does it help or hinder the development of infrastructure? How will this be discussed, not only within Netherlands, but also outside? I'm not sure. I'm looking a little bit at you guys, maybe tempting you to respond to that, but can you respond to that, or is it difficult to respond on how that discussion is going.
Let's say on a national point, it's just finalizing the investigation that we are doing. On an international level, of course, it's vital that if we create value, for instance, by raising up the purity level, it's vital that you keep the value once it's crossing the border. And what we see there is that foreign countries are not on that level yet. So the situation right now is that in foreign countries there's a tendency to keep the purity level a little bit lower. But does it make me worrying? I don't think so, because we have been frontrunner ever since hydrogen has taken off. So I expect our position to be sort of a guideline for other countries as well. But as you hear me being carefully building up my sentences, it's always difficult to predict what's happening on an international level. So that's what I can share with you right now.
I think that's a fair answer for now. There's a big task, of course, in developing a hydrogen economy, and not all answers are there yet. And that's maybe the chance of the front runner, that you are able to fill in the gaps on the other side. There are also the first questions asked to the front runner, and then you don't get always the answers that you may need.
Maybe elaborate a little bit, because I think the question also pointed out whether or not our development at the moment is being hindered by that. The question is still in the air, and I can answer quickly on that one. I don't think that is. We are able to plan, because technically, well, obviously, ultimately we need to know what the quality that will flow through our grid is going to be, and which rules are around that. For designing the grid, we can live with the spread that is available at the moment. So we are in full speed ahead developing our grid. Ultimately, we need an answer, and the quicker the better, but it's not hindering at all at the moment in the development.
Okay, very good. Maybe Jen, to ask you the question as well, is it a topic at the table at this moment? Just to have some...
No.
No? Okay. No, that's good as well. That's also good to know. Then several people ask for the Delta Rhine corridor that you explained about, and try to have the several questions bundled together. But let's start with: will there be a different network, different regime, or how that will that be combined with the natural grid? Can you explain?
Maybe I told that a bit too quickly in my storyline, but what we agreed with the consortium that it will be part of the Dutch hydrogen grid. In other words, there will be no other regime. It will be part of our grid, and it will be part of basically the system as developed, and the contract that has been developed by the group of Sandrine. So no, the answer is simple. It's not going to be a different system anymore.
It's not going to be a different system, but the plan of Delta Corridor is also to connect it to Germany. How does that planning look like? A lot of people are looking for areas. North Rhine-Westphalia is coming back. How will these cross-border connection be catered? And that's not only because of the what I read from the, let's say, the transport of hydrogen, but also again the ability to store hydrogen at the places that are being developed.
Well, if you look at the rollout plan that's going to be on our website, you can see that we already have connections to Germany in the initial phase, in the first coastal phase. We will elaborate on that one in the connecting phase, so there's a lot more connectivity to Germany, including the possibilities to connect to the rural area in Germany. And as already said, we are in heavy discussion. Harry Smit is the person in our team who's doing most of those discussions with the network operators on the other side of the border, which is because we can build infrastructure on the Dutch side, but we need to connect it to something on the German side in order to get to the customers in the German area. But those discussions are also very heavily going on.
So this is status for now, but also on the next update on the development, this could be an issue to be addressed separately, how this connection is going.
Yeah, we are developing that, and as I said, the initial plans were there to connect to Germany, and those are still alive. So.
Okay, that's very good to learn. Yeah. Then there are some questions coming towards the contractual part and the tariff part. Let's start with the initial question. First of all, the network will be developed, but only by 2031 there will be kind of regulation on the network. And I'm looking a little bit at you, Gijs. Not sure if you need to answer or somebody else. Why not earlier regulation on the grid? That's basically the question that's being asked. Can't that be done? You can also say, well, if the network is there, we're going to start to regulate. What is behind it? And there will be a follow-up question on tariffs. So if you can answer, please do so, Guido.
Guys can elaborate on that one, but I want to make one misunderstanding up front going away. I think from day one, with all the subsidies and all the rulings on the DAAP, as discussed, we are already regulated. We are not regulated in the legal sense of the law yet. That will be done as soon as the law is completely there. But we feel and we are regulated from day one, basically.
Oh, that's a clear statement, because that may not be known by everybody. The regulation is not only by, let's say, the gas law as it is now for natural gas. It will also be with all the conditions to this development that we're dealing with now. Okay. So basically, yeah, you can add to that.
Maybe to add on this, when we started this whole process, let's say the European situation wasn't clear, like it's becoming clear right now. So that's one reason we didn't want to wait for decarbonization package and everything that's coming forward from that. So in order to keep up the tempo, we started the process, and I think just as Guido said, we are acting as if the regulation is already in place. The big difference is that what happens when you enter into regulation, then your tariffs are based on a different systematic approach, different algorithm, I would say, than we're doing right now. Since we have been given the 750 million, we have a nice area in which we can balance the tariffs in a proper way. And we must know that the sooner you enter into the full regulation, the sooner you enter in a different algorithm. So we have some sort of, we now have a period of more freedom in how to deal with several challenges. So I think that's a good thing. So the combination of the freedom that we are keeping up until 2031, where we expect the infrastructure to be, let's say, sufficiently full in order to move over to the next phase. I think that's gaining both everything you need, I would say. So both flexibility and good tariffs.
So it's basically to accommodate speed.
Exactly.
And you take the positive from all the developments that we take. So that's very good. But you already mentioned several times tariff and tariff calculation, which will be done differently on a full regulation. Is there something to tell about how the tariffs will be set now? Is it HNS or Gasunie who is going to set tariffs? How does that work?
Now it's getting technical. So,
yeah, I'm sorry. I get technical questions.
My staff, where are you? There. Help me out.
Yeah, if you can respond, but then you need a mic, so maybe, or you need to come this way. That's fine as well. But maybe handheld in the back. It will be set up for you right now. He will join here. Wouter van der Schaaf, Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy.
Yeah. Okay, welcome. Well, basically, we set the tariffs for a hypothetical situation when we assume the network to be full, And what is full in this sense is that we assume that we actually reach our targets to develop 4 gigawatts of electrolyzers in 2030. And then we assume they are actually using the grid. So we set the tariff specifically based on those 4 gigawatts. And then you can also think when in 2031 you will have the regulator setting the tariffs and you will have reached the 4 gigawatts, then you would assume at this moment you don't assume a tariff spike. You assume that the volumes are there, and basically we set the volumes for the hypothetical situation of 2030, that these volumes are there and that this would be the right tariff. And basically, this tariff is too low for the whole phase up to 2030, and then we use the subsidy to actually cover the losses that are made because the tariff for this moment in the development is too low.
Thanks. Before you go, that's clear for me. But there will be a shift after 2031. Does it mean that there will be a big impact on the tariff? So do people need to be bothered about how the tariff development will go after that, or not?
Well, as we know now, and again, we assume that the 4 gigawatts are there in 2030, the 4 gigawatts of electrolysis. And when the regulator would set the volumes in a cost-efficient manner, and these volumes are actually used in the grid, at this moment you will not assume a tariff spike or a tariff change. But again, the assumption is that we actually realize altogether those 4 gigawatts of electrolyzers.
Thanks very much, Wouter. So basically, it's trying to develop and accommodate the smooth process. That's with all the technical explanation that Wouter just did, to make sure that also the interest, but the risks that you're facing are taken into account, at least. Let's shift again to the popular topic of contracts. And let's start with the first one. If parties are going to sign a connection study agreement, is it sufficient to get connected, or do you need transport agreement after that as well?
Well, thank you for raising this question. A connection study agreement is agreed on to start the necessary study work, more detailed study work towards a connection. The transport agreement sees on making use of the transportation service. So depending on what you want as a customer, if you want to connect and make use of the transportation, you need both. If you only seek for a connection and to start the process, a CSA would be sufficient. But then a CSA on itself will not be enough to actually realize a connection. For that, we have to work towards investment agreement and a connection agreement.
Okay, so that's clear. It's one step, but it's not the final step. Final step, you need the final transport agreement. And maybe again, sorry?
Sorry,
no.
Not fully clear then. If you want to make use of the transportation service, so for the shippers, you need a transportation agreement. There are, for example, parties, for example, terminals, that have given us information that they just want a connection. For those parties, a CSA and investment agreement and connection agreement will be sufficient.
Okay, that's clear. That's
okay.
That's, let's say, a process that resembles a process for natural gas with shippers, connected parties, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much for this explanation. Maybe a follow-up. I'm not sure again if it's for the both of you, but it's about the technical annexes. Some of the technical questions have come across the stage before, but what is the planning for the technical annexes? Yeah.
There actually isn't.
Thank you.
What we agreed at the table was the annexes that we really needed for parties to take a final investment agreement on. So we decided to write these annexes up front, and after summer we will start discussing on the rest of the trilogue process. And obviously, the planning of these annexes will be part of that discussions.
Okay, so it will come at the table, but not at this moment. in time.
I'm not quite sure whether or not all the annexes will be at the trialogue table, because some of them are really plant specific or specific for the transport agreement that's on the table. So we might see some annexes that are not needed to discuss about that. Maybe just on a content, what is in the annex, but not the specifics.
So where it impacts basically the parties that want to make use of the network, it will be discussed at trialogue table. When generally impacts, otherwise it will be more bilateral discussion between HNS.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
That's clear. Thanks very much for this. And then, sorry, the questions are starting to change now in position, so that doesn't help if you already picked out where to read. And now let's pick another question that will come later. What is the biggest risk for the timeline? You explained that the timeline has changed compared to last year when there was a webinar in the development. What is the biggest risk?
The biggest risk, I think I already tried to explain, is making sure that we get all the right permits in place. I think that at the moment is in specifically the Netherlands, but we can see that in other countries as well. But I'm focusing on the Netherlands. It's difficult to get all the permits in place at the right time and at the right pace. We obviously are doing all we can in the participation process that is needed to get people aligned and supportive on the project. But the risk is always that there's something or somebody who is so much against it that they use all the process time that they can get, and that would be possible to delay our projects.
Okay, that's clear, and I think many of you who are developing projects will face similar issues, but there is also another specific issue mentioned over here, and that was part of your explanation of delay as well, and that's the new natural gas flows, which have changed from site. Can, for instance, the natural gas flows with a new LNG impact the planning that you're having at this moment in time?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think I already said that obviously the gas flows have an impact. We've been calculating now all kinds of scenarios that we can imagine at the moment by changing gas flow. So things that are completely new might still put another view on that, but we've tried to use all the information that we can get and calculate all kinds of scenarios that we can think of. So there shouldn't be a big issue on changes in that. Well, you never know. We all didn't expect a war to come along, so I can't say firmly 100% that that nothing will happen. But as far as we know, we've been calculating all kinds of flows. But for many of them, it's still uncertain how we exactly are going to do this. So what we also do already alongside is to make sure that we have a backup plan. If a line isn't available, well, what is the alternative? So that's also part of why I said in the beginning we looked at a lot more detail in how to do things. We didn't plan only how to get it done, but we also planned already what are our alternative options, what are our plan B, C's, D's to get the momentum going.
Okay, clear. Thanks. Yeah, it's going a little bit from left to right, but nevertheless, you're still sitting there, so apparently it's going okay. Coming back to cluster 6, which is mentioned already before, is there an option to participate in the development of the projects for cluster 6? That's one of the questions, and I want to put another question next to that right away. That is, you mentioned, let's say, for the study connection study agreements that there will need to be a guarantee, but can that guarantee be shared with multiple parties? For instance, in a cluster 6 initiative, if you like. So, and not sure if it's at the table yet. It's not at the table, so then it will be up to you if you can elaborate.
I'm more than willing to elaborate a little bit on that one. I think Anouk already explained. Obviously, we'll do a first study before we go into a study agreement with the customers. How do we possibly see the connection being developed? So that we exactly also know what a study agreement basically contains, or what do we need to do to get all the details that we need. Obviously, in that phase, from our first initial analysis, it's up to us to discuss on an individual basis with those customers how the study agreement will look like. So I'm not at front saying that's not possible. It all depends on the local situation.
Okay, so get into contact to find out what it will be about. Okay, that's clear. There are always people that looking far ahead, and I know hydrogen is a development that has a long outlook. But one of the questions is if let me find it back again. If there is dispute with Hynetwork Services, how will that be taken care of?
Well, we can,
If it's difficult, it's going to right,
exactly.
or left.
I can take that one. I think this is one of the kind of critical points that was raised at the trialogue table, and parties insisted that there was some kind of recourse procedure there. We have been discussing about an arbitration institute. We have been talking about going to court if parties cannot reach a conclusion on dispute. For the moment, I think the only way is going to court. And what might happen in near future, I just don't know. I know that some people like to have ACM in a role earlier than before there is regulation in place from ACM. But we don't know how that will evolve.
Okay, but it can be expected if they get a role in regulation that they will also get a role in this.
Typically they would have this arbitration role, let's say.
Okay, so that is basically to come. That's kind of, let's say, normal if you work in open access situations, but the question is asked, so I want to put it on stage as well. How do you assure non-discriminatory approach and access to the infrastructure? And I would almost say it's in DNA if you're working in such an environment, but nevertheless it's being asked, so there is a concern. So let's address it.
Welcome to the trilogue table.
Welcome to
as well.
Oh, welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you cannot be invited right away. So you need to contact now FNW or Energie Nederland.
So no, I can elaborate a little bit on
please do
that,
so.
because that's, I think, the reason that we started this process, because we find this very important. So that is exactly the reason why the trilogue process has started, so that we have non-discriminatory conditions for everyone that wants to make, use and access our network. So yeah, I think that's the answer.
That's the answer. Okay, so
And yes, there is an intermediate role for the representative organizations, as there is in natural gas, I would say. And what I said, other representative organizations are welcome to join at the table once we have set version 1.0.
Okay, I think that's clear. So it's let's say a topic at the table, and it's being discussed between parties. So quite open about that. This question a little bit cryptic, so I hope you can deal with it because it will be asked to you. So maybe you are aware what's behind it. But will the information of the flex discussion on the backbone become available quickly? To make sure all market parties have the same info, in particular, given the open season for high stock.
The flex discussion, I'm going to assume that this is concerning pipeline flexibility.
I would assume the same, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
There is already, yesterday, there was a new version of the annex for pipeline flexibility service. So if this question is related to that, then please have a look at that new annex. And if not, we are working with this separate group for the pipeline flexibility service And the people from FEMWE and Energie Nederland are happy to guide you to the right persons to pose questions to. And if not, just send us a mail, then we will see what we can do.
Okay.
If there's not enough details in this new annex.
Thanks for this. Then going back to the backbone, if you ask for a connection study agreement, will that always be a connection to the national network, or can it also be a connection to a regional network? How does that work? And how does connection from regional network to be developed? That's already explained, but still, how does that work to the national infrastructure?
I think, as meant earlier, it's not the first step in the process. So in the initial study work, we will have a discussion if it's logical to connect to the regional network or to connect to the national network. The CSA contract sees on the study work in case of a connection to the national network or to the main network and not to the regional network. And therefore, I think it will really help that the study is started to further examine the role of the regional network. So in the basis, the CSA is for the national for the main network.
Okay, but it can lead, the initial study, it can lead to maybe opportunities for different network setups with regional network, given the specifications that are being discussed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's something I think is being discussed in a step prior to CSA.
Prior to CSA. Yeah. Okay, that's and that's still for free to discuss. So that's very good. And then the connection agreement, the annual fee, and in my view, it's a pre-assumption because I did not hear about an annual fee for a connection agreement. But nevertheless, there is about a fee for connection agreement. Will that be similar for everybody? Will it be? It's asking for something that probably does not exist yet, but still, there's a concern that there may be difference, and that's now my assumption, in initial parties that are involved in the development of the infrastructure and parties that are connected later. So are they treated in the same way regarding specifications, regarding tariffs, etc., etc.?
Yes, there's a connection agreement is part of the trilogue process. So those general terms and conditions are applicable for everyone. If you look at the exact fee, that will be based on the more local situation, and that will be based on the actual costs of the connection, and those will be translated into a fee.
So the connection will be based on the local situation, and transport tariffs are based on the general system setup that will be involved.
So there will be general conditions that will apply, but the actual fee will be based on a cost plus basis, which can be different for different connections.
That's clear, because connections will be different by default, I would almost say. Now that's quite clear. So thanks for that. That there is concern of the location of the storage versus the large volumes of hydrogen that may enter the network. So maybe, and that's an assumption of the person who's asking this question, obviously, assumes a lot of hydrogen in Rotterdam, sees a lot of storage in Northern Netherlands. Why?
Well, that's good. That's a very good question. But the storage locations that we are able to build are in that area. You can't build them in Rotterdam. That's one thing. I think there's more flexibility in the hydrogen system. If you look at Rotterdam, a lot of production will be not only electrolyzers but also will be import terminals. They will have their own storage. Is my takeaway from how I look at the developments that we can see in the market. So, and on the connectivity, the distance for a molecule is not of the issue. So, well, as long as it's connected to the system, you can use the storage facility.
So the only way to change to Rotterdam, if you pick up the salt mountain under the ground and move that to Rotterdam, then you have an opportunity to put it there.
I'm not a storage builder, so don't ask me.
Okay. You know, that's true. That's a separate business, of course. questions are still coming in. Very good. Again, on the contracts, what are the periods that the contracts need to be signed for? Okay, thank you. Difficult again. Sandrie takes it up.
I think the standard contract period is 10 years. Isn't it?
A minimum of 10 years.
A minimum of 10 years. Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
So it's possible to have a longer term contract.
That would be my follow-up question. Can it be shorter? But actually, you say it can be longer. So minimum 10 years.
Cannot be shorter.
Yeah, that's indeed a good answer on one of the questions. But then, of course, the other follow-up question is there are a lot of parties developing now their projects in the initial stages, also not sure what the business will look like in future. So that 10 years creates a big risk if you need to sign for that. And as everybody knows, contracts is about risk and sharing risk. So how does that look like? The 10 years contracts versus the risk that shippers or connected parties or whoever face?
I think the current set of general terms and conditions state that the minimum period is 10 years. That will probably be for a few more years now. And I think once there is a regulation from European side, there will be like standard capacity products pushed forward. And if that's in the law, probably HNS has to follow these. So that's my expectation, to be frank.
But you basically, what you say is that this is the term now, and the term probably will somewhere have a legal base. So that's what you need to comply with. But then again, it's still a risk for parties who want to develop contracts. How do you look at that?
We also see and hear in the market that projects that are being developed are also seeking for some certainty that the transport will be in place for the duration of their projects. So,
Parties that are at the table now typically don't invest for a few years or for a few months. They invest for larger periods. And as I understood it correctly, well, there are some people in the room that might correct me on this, but let's see. But these parties typically want, in the period before a contract has been signed, there's a risk for them. So they really care for how can I get the certainty that there will be a contract for me with the right megawatts in place. And once they have made their final investment decision, a 10-year period is not that bad for them. That's what I got from the table, but if anyone in the room wants to correct me, I'm fine with this.
So let's say the assumption that it's a big risk for the first shippers may also in turn be a big comfort for the shippers having secured a contract. So it can be both ways. Maybe then
pre-signing, it's a risk, and after signing, it's a gain.
Let's look at it as a gain for now. That's more easy. But it leads to another question. What you outlined is the planning for the infrastructure in the different phases, and then one phase is 25, 27. Can you publish tomorrow on the website a more detailed planning when specific kilometers will be developed and will be ready? Is that possible?
Well, we will publish the rollout plan, as mentioned, and with specific customers we can discuss exactly on their location what in that period when exactly that they will be available. So that's a discussion on an individual basis with the contact person within HNS to discuss.
So it will not be a general available planning, but it will be bilateral discussed with all the parties that want to have a connection, how that can look for them specifically in that situation. Okay, that's quite clear. Thanks. We talked indeed a lot about the infrastructure, about Rotterdam, Delta Rhine corridor, import terminals, but that's let's say, only, what is it, about half of the borderline of the Netherlands. There is another borderline of the Netherlands which is connected to Germany, to Belgium, may go through Italy corridor, a Spain corridor. Are we also developing that with a certain priority to join, let's say, the countries surrounding us to have the more trans-Europe pipeline connections rather than only focusing on the coastal line?
Two things on that one. Obviously, we can only look at the ones that we are connected to, so we can only basically be building or making sure that we are looking at building the connectivity to the connecting countries, which do include, as I mentioned, the incoming flows on terminals and offshore. In a European setting, we are all, as Gasunie, also part of the NSOG discussions, which also look at hydrogen. And in that light, obviously, the European backbone is what we are part of. So we'll definitely try to make sure that what we build is also connected to that European pipeline system. But for us, the main lines is to make sure that what is needed to connect to Belgium and to Germany is available.
Okay. That's clear answer. Also for, let's say, the different phasing of the backbone, you explained the IJsselmeerroute, which is not available in the early stage and in the first stage. Is there an option that it can become available before 2030? Or and especially, I think people are preempting from the northern part of the Netherlands, but on the left side of the IJsselmeer, how can they be connected to storage? That's, I think, the question behind this.
On the left side, if you look at the connection phase, which is the middle phase on our rollout plan, all the industrial clusters are connected, including the connection to the storage. So from that moment on, everybody can be connected. The exception is obviously the Friesland area, which is more depending on the IJsselmeerroute being available. Obviously, if there's a lot of demand, or at least customers are there who show that demand in an earlier stage, we could look at connection towards the IJsselmeerroute. But it will all depend on availability of that grid. There's a bit more than the crossing, basically, of the IJsselmeer, because that's our bottleneck at the moment.
Okay, that's clear. But then going back to the planning that you showed about phase 3, which is 2030 and beyond. Beyond can be very far away. Does it mean that it's a big unknown? How does that look like?
The only reason why there's a beyond, it could well be 31, and well, depending on permitting, could be 32. But it's not the intent that it's a longer way than that. So it's very close to 2030. That's the intent. But what you can already see there is that there's quite a bit of uncertainty still in the planning. It's a realistic planning. It has a lot of detail already available to us, that we can make sure that this planning is possible. But there are still a lot of uncertainties that can happen, which we'll all try to mitigate as a project. But we can't envisage a lot more than that. The beyond actually only stands for a short period after 2030, if needed.
Okay, that's clear. So the beyond is a little bit closer by than you may expect at the first glance. And then talking about the national infrastructure, I would say the shore infrastructure. There's also an offshore infrastructure scheduled. How will that be connected? How does that fit the planning in this whole period?
It's obviously not in my remit, the offshore grid. A colleague of mine at Gasunie is obviously looking at the design of that network, also being part of the first initial studies, as already indicated in the beginning by Gijs. What we are doing already is obviously look at where does it come on land. So where will it, or should it, or wants it to connect to our grid. And we are in discussions on making sure that if they choose the location where they come on land, that we are able to connect them to the main grid on land.
Okay, so we're trying to schedule that, but you explained yet you're not developing the offshore grid. But again, a follow-up question on the offshore grid, you may know that will that have, let's say, same tariff? Will it fall in the same tariff area, or will they have separate tariff? Is it clear already, or not?
That's totally unclear at the moment. I think that's part of the discussion that's going on.
Okay, so that will come. Let me finish with a very last technical question, and that's about RED 3. The scope of RED 3, and I'm not sure who to look at, is actually smaller than initially expected. Less demand for renewable fuels of non-biological origin in 2030. Does it impact the schedule overall of the network that the RED 3 is having a different scope?
The only thing I can say at this moment on that is that obviously because of the smaller scope, the speed of the development of the market might be slower. But to be honest, we can think everything that comes along, and we didn't anticipate on a full usage of the grid from day one anyway. So we need to see how this goes. But I think there's so much to do. Let's first do the things that are needed. And make sure that the market develops in the way it should develop, and then worry about where does it go and how big does it get.
Okay, thanks very much. That's clear. For now, I would like to finish this interactive session, at least interactive with me and you via Mentimeter. A lot of questions has been asked. You may have heard your question directly back here, sometimes not, because some of the questions resembled each other. So I try to grasp, let's say, the essence, what I believe could be the essence of the question. But I would like to thank Guido, Anouk, and Sandrie for sharing the answers on many of your questions with us. So thanks very much. Yes, and then we're coming to the final slides of this this webinar and the closing of this day. We had some aims up front, and the aims you can all read there. I explained them in the beginning. We hope that we fulfilled your need for information, your requirement for information, and that we were able to update you to the best of the knowledge that we have today on the development of the infrastructure. As already said at the beginning, we don't have all the answers yet. And as very nice explained by Gijs, we are a front runner in development of the hydrogen economy and also the hydrogen network. That means that the questions are first asked to us and not always clear what the answer should be. But we hope that you found this worthwhile to be here. Or, of course, at home or in the office to listen to this webinar. And as explained, the consultation of the rollout plan, uitrolplan, will start next week. So then you can find it back published on the website and respond to that accordingly. The connection study agreement will be available mid-July. I already explained that the slides will be shared with you after this webinar, so you can have a look at it again. Of course, you can look back the full webinar and listen again to all the stuff that has been said and shared with you. And for the people here in the room, we will go to a network lunch. And you have all received a badge, and maybe you wondered that your neighbor has a different color than you have, but there is a reason for that. That we tried to point, and that's part of the information you gave to us, by the way, so we didn't just wild guess, but try to point where in the value chain you are developing your projects. Make it a little bit easier for you to find maybe people that you've not met before that are in similar developments, to contact, to match, to share, and to start discussions. Because if you look at establishing a hydrogen economy, a hydrogen value chain, that cannot be done by a single party. You need every party in the value chain, and the value chain for hydrogen, the open access value chain for hydrogen, is a new value chain. So we all need to talk to each other, work with each other, and try to combine efforts to make sure that we are starting to build this. Here you see the different colors, quite clear along the value chain. So please look each other up, and if you want to mingle just with somebody you already know, that's fine as well. That's full up to you in this process. My final closing would be that on behalf of Hynetwork Services, I would like to very much thank you for being here, listening to us, asking all the questions, and hopefully for fruitful follow-up discussions during lunch. I also want to thank you very much at home, at the office, at anywhere I can see, of course, for being here and asking the questions and participating in this event. Last but not least, I would like to thank the presenters of today, Gijs Postma, Guido, Custers, Anouk van den Berg, and Sandrie Egberts, for sharing the presentations and the answer, also for Wouter van der Schaaf to help out with the real difficult questions and to answer that directly on stage. And last but not least, being here for you is maybe quite common. I've seen what behind the scenes is all necessary to accommodate this, and I think also thank you very much for the organization of this event, for us being able to have the discussion and share with us. I would like to wish you a very pleasant remainder of the day. Have a very nice lunch, and I hope to see you next time again. Thank you.